Classroom of the Elite is one of those anime that you often question, should it get another season? Is it worth getting another season? I don't know. A lot of people make videos on will it get a season 2, why it won't get a season 2, but I just want to ask, should it get a season 2? Obviously, the story was not necessarily completed, meaning, it's implied that another season would come. Obvious spoilers for the first season of the anime. I'm assuming you've obviously seen it if you watched it. I'm not going to really spoil anything from the light novels, but let's get into that first. I am up to date. I've read all of them. I've been reading them for about a year as they come out, and I gotta say they're pretty good. I recommend if you like reading in general and you enjoyed the series. They're a pretty easy light novel to get into. Every other light novel series I've tried to get into, I've struggled, but even though I started from what I'd already seen, it was just enjoyable. Like, the writing is really strong. And that is directly why I think needs to be answered, does it need a second season? Really, you could look at the first season or just the show itself as a glorified ad, really, for the light novels itself, because the ending sequence, obviously, that everyone loves, it's more, that could almost be the end of a trailer, in all honesty, and it really does do a good job of really advertising the series. The first two novels, in my opinion, are probably the most boring, the most uninteresting, and even volume 4.5, which they take a bit of things from in the anime, is super not interesting. I think those three are the worst. And the fact that they made them into an interesting anime by changing elements that I am fans of is good to see. I think it makes it more tolerable. I even think volume 3, which is one of the best, is well done in the anime. There's some parts I don't like, obviously, but I think it's a good adaptation. Obviously, there's things about the series that I don't like. It's very difficult to go as in-depth, as you can in a book. That's why if you ever watched Harry Potter, the movies just are a little less, detail-oriented, a little more simple. And that's just the same thing. I think the major consequences of that is that the characters are just a lot less interesting. Mostly, Aina Kanji is probably significantly nerfed in terms of character writing. Alright, I just had to look something up. But yeah, just his character just feels like it suffers weirdly, if that makes sense, as in when he isn't able to fully flesh out his thoughts. It feels like he's just this badass right away when that's, more when the layers are peeled back. We see that, sort of that's something that comes with time and is kind of, it's implied that he's more than is being led on, but we don't know to what extent. But it feels like they don't really do that very well in the anime. They don't really just work with this character as well as I would have hoped. Not to take away, I think a lot of people who, they watch the anime, they read the novels, and they go, the anime sucks. I hate it. And anyone who likes it is bad. And it's like, no, if you like it, I get it. I think it's good. It's something, I enjoyed it. I don't think it's objectively that great, as there's definitely some major flaws. I'm not going to spend this whole thing just picking apart season 1, but there's definitely some flaws, but I get why people like it. And I get why people, especially people who haven't read the novels, want a second season. So, roping back, should it get another season? What is my answer? Maybe. That's a bad answer, but let's just talk about a couple external factors. One is just what has been the common consensus for the last few years, probably before this year, is that it will not happen. Why? Because the anime did poorly. The Blu-ray sales weren't great. The rumor was that fans didn't buy it sort of out of protest because they didn't like the changes they made from the novel to the anime, which, not a big fan either, but I think that's just a rumor. I haven't heard any. It's been pretty difficult to track that down. But in reality, it sounds like the author isn't a massive fan of it either, but what author is ever a fan of their anime adaptation? I can't think of many. But, that was the biggest issue. And it feels like that hurdle is maybe not as high as we once thought. Recently, I noticed, I think it's 7 Seas is publishing an English version of the manga which sucks. I will say that sucks. Objectively, it sucks. If you've watched the show and haven't are unwilling to read, don't read that. It is a waste of your time. Anyways, like I was saying, it's getting an adaptation, English adaptation, which is kind of a big deal. I mean, it's also getting, it's in the same group as Darling in the Franxx, also getting one, and that was a pretty popular manga and anime. So if they're, if it's in that tier, like, man, we got to put this out, it means something's going right. Usually the Western audience doesn't have a big factor on anything ever. So that means somewhere. That means in Japan, things must be going better for the series. I've seen the light novel sales have been incredibly high. And all of that is to say is, yeah, someone might be interested in putting out another season. Studios probably weren't that interested, but whether it's, Studio Lurch, I don't know what it is. I don't know how to pronounce it, but maybe if it's not them, someone else might be interested, which is cool. Let's talk a bit about how light novels typically get adaptations. Light novels are different than manga in the sense that they publish much slower. 3-ish a year, 4 maybe, not a lot. It's a very slow burn, to say the least. And that's normally why they aren't immediately slotted in for another season, unless they're just uberly successful. The two, major ones I can think of that got second seasons recently is one is Re:Zero, and that was a long time, but that's nothing compared to the irregular Magic High School, which took forever. Usually studios tend to have a pretty, they have a basic idea of what they're going to be making over the next few years. If you remember with One Punch Man, when that got its second season, they kind of just had to beg someone to take it on. And obviously they just weren't prepared to get it out as quick as they needed to because they already had stuff they needed to make. I think it's JC's staff who did it. And, that it just messed everything up. Typically, they had their stuff planned, messed up. And so what all of that is to say is, if they want another season, they would probably have to schedule it in now for the future. They would have to say, hey, we want one now. And, whatever studio is interested would have to start, scheduling that in, meaning it probably isn't going to come, next year. It would take a couple more years, is what I'm saying, if I had to guess. And unlike manga, which manga tends to get second seasons pumped out much quicker, probably because a manga's run, especially if it's a weekly, like a Shonen Jump, is a lot shorter, meaning they tend to want to pump it out while it's still going or it's just ended. Think Promised Neverland, which regardless of how you think, they wanted to get that second season out probably just as, the manga was kind of fresh in people's mind as it was ending. It wasn't a couple years after, reason why stuff like Siren, which maybe I'll talk about in another video, just never gets the light of day, because why would they? They're trying to keep it fresh, and that means pretty much everything else, every other type of adaptation kind of gets the short end of the stick. Now, I've gotten off topic here, but all this to say is, the logistics-wise, some of them look favorable, and if somebody tells you it looks favorable for another season, they're probably right. But on the same time, even if another season was going to come out, it's not anytime soon, and it still would be a massive undertaking. Mostly because they probably would not want to push out another bad season, because it really, if they want to believe in a second season, they might want to believe in, a few more seasons. So they kind of would want to invest in it being good. So do I think a second season would be good if it came out? I think it could be. Obviously, when the source material of anything is good, adapting it into another format, it has the potential to carry that weight. And I don't see why not. It would most likely pick up with Volume 4, which Volume 4 is a very strong volume, but not a great place to start a season, to be honest. My biggest issue with the show with the second season is that it gets a lot more complicated as the series goes on, and you really need those pages. And I think the last volume, the people who translated it, the English fan translation, had a map, a diagram for every chapter, just so you understood what is going on, which is crazy. That wasn't in the original. They added that to help understand. That's just how, I don't want to say convoluted, but that's just how messy it's kind of gotten. Not in a bad way, but it's just not an easy adaptation. It's not some isekai garbage that they could just throw out. They would have to put a ton of effort into it. The series past Volume 3 reminds me a lot of Hyoka. If you haven't seen Hyoka, it's kind of a mystery thriller, not thriller, but it's like a daily slice of life mystery kind of show where, the main characters, they find out small mysteries. And usually it's in the kind of the process of there is a mystery and it takes them a couple episodes to figure it out, and then it's kind of revealed with no real major, consequences or anything. And it's kind of the format of a lot of volumes where it's like something is happening, some big event, whether it's, whether it's like the track and field event, and there's forces at play behind the scenes that we don't get the full context to. You have to pick up context clues throughout, and then towards the end, everything is kind of wrapped together. That's very much how the final arc works, where there's a lot of context, a lot of things happen that don't make sense when they happen. Think, like when Horikita, when the mud gets dumped on her. That doesn't make sense when it happens. No one understands that. But, everything sort of ties back together. And let me just say, the show is very not subtle about a lot of the hints they drop. They make it a lot easier to kind of figure out what's going on than the novel did, which probably a good thing, honestly. I felt smart when I figured it out when I watched it the first time. But I gotta say, I'll be honest, I'm not at the peak of my knowledge. A couple of months ago, when I was fresh off reading them, or actually probably a year ago at this point, was probably when I would have known, I would have had better insight. But, I still have an idea what's up. To conclude, do I think a season 2 will happen? It's possible. It's more likely than it was a year ago, but I still don't think it's that likely. Do I think it should get a season 2? Maybe. It would have to be done well for me to want it. It would have to be done really well. Like, I don't want, this to be a 7 out of 10. I want this to be a 9 out of 10 for me. So, yeah, that's it. Hopefully, you have some kind of opinion formulated. And if you do, let me know, because I'm curious.